Welcome, the Lord's chosen. When enough people tell the same story about you, it stops being gossip and starts sounding like a report. That's exactly what happened to you, chosen one. You didn't just draw attention, you triggered a full-scale investigation without even knowing it. People weren't whispering, they were filing testimonies like they were being paid by the hour. And the strangest part? Every witness, every observer, every accidental bystander seemed to repeat the same exact thing about you, almost word for word, like they were reading off a script they didn't know they memorized. Why? Because your presence doesn't scatter people, it organizes them. Even your critics become unintentionally synchronized when they talk about you. That's rare. In psychology, when multiple sources describe a person with the same tone, the same energy, and the same observations, it usually means one thing. You're not projecting an image. You're radiating an identity. And that's what unsettled them. They tried to decode you, profile you, figure you out. And some even tried to run background checks that looked suspiciously like low-budget detective work. They expected contradictions, complications, and red flags, something juicy at least. But you didn't give them fireworks. You gave them facts, and facts are annoyingly consistent. This is where it got almost comical, because when people with chaotic personalities investigate someone stable, it becomes a cosmic joke. They come back with the same conclusion over and over again, and suddenly they look like the ones being analyzed. Imagine a whole group of people trying to find evidence against you, but only discovering evidence against themselves. It's poetic and slightly embarrassing for them. So buckle up. We're about to break down why their investigation didn't expose you. It revealed you. And why every witness told the same story. Not because they rehearsed it, but because you leave the same imprint wherever you go. Number one, they investigated you because your consistency exposed their instability. People rarely investigate someone who shifts, wobbles, or changes their behavior based on the room they're in. Those kinds of people are easy to understand, easy to predict, and easy to dismiss. But when someone moves through life with a steady rhythm, when their attitude, values, and reactions stay anchored no matter who's watching, it unsettles people who live in emotional chaos. Your consistency wasn't just noticed, it was studied. It wasn't accidental, it was disruptive. Without even trying, you became the mirror that revealed how unstable and reactionary they were. The investigation started the moment they realized they couldn't control your narrative. You didn't behave the way they expected. You didn't fold when they pushed. You didn't explode when they provoked. And you didn't change your tone depending on who walked into the room. You kept being you. That level of stability confuses people who depend on unpredictability as their survival tactic. When someone is used to drama, your calm becomes suspicious. When someone thrives on inconsistency, your steadiness feels like a threat. What bothered them wasn't that you were strong, it was that you were the same, day after day, interaction after interaction. Whether you were under pressure or completely relaxed, your character didn't break. And when someone can't figure out what makes you tick, they start digging for answers. They ask around. They pull other people aside. They try to find a crack, a slip-up, or a contradiction. But all they found was repetition. People described you the same way in different situations because you showed up the same way in different situations. Your consistency exposed the instability they tried so hard to hide. It highlighted the emotional volatility they hoped no one would notice. It made their patterns loud, and without intending to, you forced them to confront where they lacked discipline, self-control, and direction. They investigated you thinking they'd uncover your secrets, but all they uncovered was their own discomfort with someone who doesn't bend, shift, or scatter under pressure. Your steadiness was the revelation they didn't expect, and the one they couldn't handle. Number two, every witness repeated the same thing because your character leaves no room for alternate interpretations. When people talk about you, they don't stumble over what to say. They don't debate, argue, or twist their words to make their account fit a narrative. Every witness, every observer, every casual onlooker ends up describing the same person in the same way, with the same energy. That's not coincidence. That's the undeniable result of a character so defined, so aligned with itself, that it doesn't allow for multiple versions or conflicting opinions. You don't leave gaps for assumptions or misinterpretations. You don't project one face in public and another in private. You exist fully, consistently, and transparently, and that leaves people scrambling because they're used to reading people like a jigsaw puzzle, not a completed masterpiece. Your actions, words, and presence are so coherent that anyone trying to describe you has only one accurate route. Even when they try to exaggerate or add personal bias, the core truth is impossible to mask. They realize their attempts to color the picture fail because your essence is too clear, too consistent, too precise. That's why the investigation couldn't produce conflicting stories. It didn't matter if the witnesses had never met each other or even interacted with you directly. They all arrived at the same conclusions independently, not because they were rehearsed, but because your reality is self-evident. This is terrifying for people who thrive on ambiguity. People who rely on perception games, gossip, or half-truths get exposed when faced with someone like you. Their stories about you naturally converge because your truth doesn't bend to fit anyone's agenda. You are a fixed point in a world of chaos, and your integrity has a way of reflecting itself outward so vividly that others can't misinterpret it, even if they tried. In the end, the repeated testimonies weren't just about you. They were a testament to the clarity of your presence. Every witness said the same thing because there was no room for alternative narratives. You weren't someone who could be easily reimagined or reinterpreted. You existed in a way that left one undeniable truth. The world may be chaotic, but you are unmistakably consistent. And that consistency becomes the only story anyone can tell. Number 3, they dug into your past and found nothing. So they started inventing scenarios to justify their discomfort. When people investigate someone, they usually expect to uncover contradictions, mistakes, or hidden flaws. They dig through past actions, conversations, and relationships, hoping to find something that explains why you are the way you are. But when they looked into your history, they came up empty-handed. There were no skeletons in closets, no secret agendas, no hidden manipulations, just you, consistently aligned with your own principles. That absence of dirt was confusing, almost infuriating, for those who needed an explanation for why you commanded attention without trying, why your presence unsettled them, and why your life seemed orderly while theirs felt messy. The more they searched, the more frustrated they became. They didn't want the truth, they wanted confirmation that you were flawed. They needed proof that someone so composed, disciplined, and coherent had a weakness they could exploit. But when the truth refused to bend, their minds started filling in the gaps themselves. They invented scenarios, misremembered events, and exaggerated minor incidents into supposed evidence. Every imagined story was a reflection of their discomfort, not a reflection of you. They created explanations to make sense of a reality that made them uneasy, that someone could live with integrity and clarity without causing chaos or drama. Their invented scenarios weren't about accuracy, they were about relief. If they could convince themselves that you had a hidden flaw, then your consistency became less threatening. Their imagination became the evidence, their assumptions became the report. Every false narrative they spun revealed more about their insecurities than about you. You weren't the one under scrutiny, they were. By the time they realized your past couldn't be twisted into a story that fit their expectations, they were left exposed. Their obsession with finding flaws backfired. They had tried to create shadows where there were none, and in doing so they admitted the truth silently. Your life, your character, and your actions are not just clean, they are impossible for them to replicate, manipulate, or undermine. The investigation didn't reveal your secrets. It revealed the discomfort of being confronted with someone unshakably real. Number 4, the investigation wasn't about uncovering truth. It was about validating their fear of your integrity. Most people assume investigations are designed to find facts, uncover hidden motives, or expose secrets. In your case, it was different. The people who scrutinized you weren't looking for the truth. They were looking for comfort. They needed evidence to explain why someone could stand so firmly in their own power, remain unshaken, and still command respect and attention without manipulation. Your integrity became a mirror they couldn't avoid, reflecting everything they feared about themselves. They weren't hunting for dirt. They were hunting for reassurance that the world still made sense, that someone like you had to have flaws, cracks, or hidden agendas. Every report they collected, every witness they interviewed, and every story they pieced together was filtered through their anxiety about your authenticity. They wanted your life to be messy because their own lives were messy. They wanted your motives to be self-serving because theirs often were. When people are insecure, the success and stability of someone else feels like a threat rather than inspiration, and their investigation was their way of trying to rewrite reality so it felt safer for them. The truth is, you didn't fit their narrative, and that panic manifested as obsession. They examined every word you spoke, every choice you made, every interaction you had, not to understand you, but to calm their own insecurities. They were trying to convince themselves that your calm, your focus, your self-control, and your moral alignment were impossible, unnatural, or somehow manipulative. But the more they dug, the more they realized that your life wasn't hiding anything. It was complete, consistent, and unshakable. Their fear of your integrity was louder than any evidence they could gather. The investigation became less about you and more about them grappling with the uncomfortable truth. Someone could exist in the world fully aligned, unapologetically real, and uncompromised. And that realization was what truly terrified them. Their reports, testimonies, and proofs weren't exposing your secrets. They were exposing their inability to face the reality of a life lived with absolute honesty and unbreakable character. Number 5, they weren't trying to expose you, they were trying to explain you. The investigation wasn't fueled by malice or curiosity, it was fueled by confusion. People are comfortable with what they can predict, label, or rationalize. You, on the other hand, didn't fit their categories. You weren't chaotic enough to dismiss, manipulative enough to fear, or shallow enough to misunderstand. You simply existed with a clarity and authenticity that made them uncomfortable. Their investigation wasn't about uncovering secrets. It was about making sense of something that refused to be explained. They needed a reason, a justification, a story they could repeat to themselves so the fact of your existence didn't challenge the order they thought they controlled. Every question they asked, every witness they pressed, wasn't aimed at proving wrongdoing, it was aimed at constructing a narrative. They wanted to know why you didn't play the games they played, why you didn't react the way they expected, why you maintained integrity in a world where most people bend to survive. Their obsession wasn't with you, it was with the cognitive dissonance you created. You exposed the gap between their expectations and reality, and that gap made them anxious. So instead of observing you, they tried to explain you. Instead of understanding, they rationalized, and every attempt to rationalize only reinforced the truth. You couldn't be easily reduced to a story they could tell themselves. The more they tried to figure you out, the more your reality resisted being simplified. Every person they asked gave the same answer because your life, actions, and energy were coherent. You weren't a puzzle. You were a pattern they couldn't replicate or dismantle. They didn't fail because you were deceptive. They failed because you were complete. Their investigation revealed more about their need to explain, control, and categorize than it did about you. In the end, the irony is striking. They believed that by investigating, they would gain power over you. Instead, they confronted a truth they couldn't contain. That some people simply cannot be explained, manipulated, or reduced to a convenient narrative. You exist as a reality they weren't prepared to handle, and that was the real revelation of their entire investigation. Number 6. Their obsession with your behavior revealed more about their secrets than your transparency. The closer they looked at you, the more they revealed themselves. Every question they asked, every whisper they spread, every attempt to dissect your life was less about uncovering who you were and more about exposing what they feared about themselves. When someone obsesses over another person's behavior, it's often a reflection of their own insecurities, guilt, or envy. Your transparency didn't make them uncomfortable because it was intimidating. It made them uncomfortable because it forced them to confront the parts of themselves they'd rather ignore. They watched, analyzed, and probed because your life was a contrast to theirs. Where they struggled with inconsistency, you were steady. Where they hid behind excuses or manipulation, you acted with integrity. Where they shifted shapes to fit expectations, you remained coherent. Their obsession wasn't curiosity, it was projection. Every imagined flaw they thought they might find in you existed in their own life, magnified by the clarity they saw in you. They weren't judging you, they were measuring themselves. Every detail of your behavior they tried to interpret was filtered through their own biases. They wanted to see weakness, contradiction, or imperfection, because seeing it would justify their world. But as they dug, they realized that the flaws they were hunting were mirrors pointing back at their own choices, mistakes, and insecurities. Every whispered theory, every report, every half-truth they circulated said more about their fear of accountability than it did about you. And here's the irony. The more transparent you were, the less power they had over you, and the more they exposed themselves. Your life didn't require concealment or manipulation. Your honesty, consistency, and integrity illuminated the cracks in their own character. The investigation was supposed to shine a light on you, but it ended up shining a light on them. Their obsession revealed their secrets, their insecurities, and their inability to live openly, while you continued moving forward untouched, untangled, and undeniable. In trying to analyze your life, they ended up revealing the parts of themselves they were most afraid the world would see. Number 7, they kept questioning people around you because they couldn't handle the fact that you never needed validation. Most people operate with an invisible safety net, the opinions of others. They need constant confirmation that they're right, that they're liked, or that their choices make sense. You don't. You never relied on external approval, and that made people uncomfortable in ways they couldn't name. When someone moves through the world with self-assurance and internal alignment, it challenges the very foundation of how others validate themselves. They don't just see your confidence, they feel the absence of their own. That's why they interrogated everyone around you, desperate to find someone who would contradict the picture you painted with your life. They hoped that by questioning those close to you, they could manufacture doubt. They wanted to find a version of you that needed them, craved recognition, or wavered under pressure. But every person they spoke to returned the same observation. You are consistent, self-sufficient, and unshakable. They realized, even if unconsciously, that you weren't performing or pretending to be confident. Your validation came from within. You never sought permission, approval, or applause. That absence of dependency made their probing meaningless, and it also made them increasingly frustrated. Their repeated attempts to gather outside opinions weren't about discovering truth. They were about creating one that fit their fears. They were trying to prove that even someone as composed as you could be shaken, that even someone as steady as you must secretly crave validation. Every consistent response from witnesses chipped away at the story they wanted to tell, leaving them exposed to the uncomfortable reality that you operate on a level they don't understand. Your independence became their obsession, and their obsession revealed the uncomfortable truth. The world doesn't revolve around them, and your worth isn't determined by anyone else's perspective. They kept questioning others because they couldn't face a reality where your life, your confidence, and your integrity exist fully without needing anyone to validate it. And that truth, more than anything, unsettled them the most. Number 8. Every witness said the same thing because you live the same way in private that you do in public. What people noticed about you wasn't an act, a performance, or a carefully curated image. It was reality. The way you move, speak, and act in public is exactly how you are when no one is watching. That kind of alignment is rare, and that's why every witness described you the same way. When someone is consistent in private and public, it becomes impossible for others to misinterpret them, exaggerate their behavior, or twist their story. You don't have layers of personas to hide behind. You don't change your tone depending on the audience. You are the same in every room, at every moment, and that consistency leaves people with one undeniable truth to report. Your life doesn't have cracks that only appear under scrutiny, and your character doesn't shift depending on who is observing. That makes you predictable in the most powerful way. It's not predictability born from weakness, but from integrity. People who investigate you keep returning the same testimonies because your behavior isn't a puzzle with multiple answers. It's a pattern that repeats, and patterns are easy to recognize, hard to dispute. They could ask 100 witnesses in different contexts, and all of them would describe the same person, because you are the same person in every context. This is what unsettles people. Most individuals act differently when they know they are being watched or judged. They perform, adjust, or manipulate to control perception. You don't. Your consistency makes others uncomfortable because it highlights the contrast between their reality and yours. While they struggle with appearances and contradictions, you move through life with clarity and coherence. By living the same way in private as you do in public, you eliminate ambiguity, you leave no room for misinterpretation, and you make it impossible for people to fabricate a narrative about you that doesn't collapse under scrutiny. Every witness saying the same thing wasn't coincidence, it was proof of the alignment of your life. Your presence is a constant, and that constancy leaves one unshakable conclusion. What you are outwardly is exactly who you are inwardly, and no investigation can ever alter that truth. Number 9, they weren't studying your actions. They were studying the impact your presence had on their ego. From the moment they started observing you, it wasn't really about what you did. Your choices, your routines, and your habits were irrelevant to them in isolation. What unsettled them, and what drove their investigation, was the way your existence affected them. You moved through life with confidence, clarity, and calm, and it forced them to notice their own shortcomings. Your presence shined a light on the parts of themselves they were trying to hide, ignore, or rationalize. Every smile, every composed response, every steady action wasn't a performance. It was a reminder of what they lacked. That reminder triggered insecurity, envy, and defensiveness, and that's why they became so obsessed with studying you. They dissected your behavior, but they weren't looking for patterns in your life. They were looking for justification to soothe the bruised parts of their ego. When someone consistently demonstrates discipline, integrity, or emotional control, it's uncomfortable for people who live in comparison or self-doubt. Your presence highlighted the contrast between who they are and who you are. And that contrast can feel like a personal attack to fragile egos. The investigation became their attempt to reclaim a sense of control, as if understanding you would somehow neutralize the discomfort your life naturally produced. The irony is that their obsession didn't give them power over you, it exposed them. The more they focused on your influence, the clearer it became that your life operates independently of their judgment. You don't exist to inflate or deflate anyone's sense of self. Your impact is an effect of your consistency and authenticity, not a conscious strategy. Ultimately, their focus on your ego effect, rather than your actions, revealed the real reason for the investigation. It wasn't curiosity, it wasn't suspicion, and it wasn't exposure. It was fear. Fear of being confronted with someone who lives unshakably real, whose presence forces reflection, whose very existence unsettles egos without trying. Their investigation didn't reveal secrets about you. It revealed their struggle to tolerate the quiet power of someone who doesn't need them to feel whole. Number 10, they wanted dirt, not truth, evidence, not understanding. The people investigating you weren't searching for clarity. They weren't looking to understand your choices, your intentions, or your mindset. They were hunting for dirt, something messy to cling to, something they could twist into a story that fit their fear or envy. Truth wasn't their goal. It was inconvenient. Real evidence didn't serve their purpose because the reality of you, steady, honest, aligned, didn't create the chaos they were expecting or hoping for. They wanted drama, contradictions, excuses, anything that would justify the insecurity they felt in your presence. Every question they asked, every witness they pressed, was filtered through the lens of expectation rather than observation. They weren't prepared for someone who doesn't need to hide flaws or manipulate perception. Their obsession was fueled by the assumption that everyone has secrets, that everyone has a weak point. When they found none, they didn't accept it. They twisted what they could, exaggerated the smallest things, or filled in gaps with assumptions. The investigation became a projection of their own biases, a reflection of what they believed the world should look like, rather than what it actually did. They weren't after understanding because understanding doesn't feed ego or validate fear. Understanding requires patience, reflection, and sometimes admiration. They didn't want to admire you. They wanted to justify themselves. They wanted to feel superior or in control, so they hunted for proof that you were flawed in ways that aligned with their expectations. The truth doesn't always give that satisfaction, so they invented narratives. The deeper irony is that their pursuit of dirt revealed the depth of your integrity, the absence of scandal, the absence of hidden agendas, and the absence of contradictions became the loudest evidence of all. Every attempt to fabricate evidence only emphasized that you are untouchable by conventional scrutiny. They sought dirt, but uncovered nothing. And in doing so, they confirmed what no one could deny. Your life, your character, and your actions exist outside the reach of fabricated narratives, and the truth about you is far more unsettling for them than any lie ever could be. Number 11. What scared them wasn't what you did. It was what you didn't do. They were expecting reactions, responses, drama, or chaos. They wanted you to falter, to justify yourself, to over-explain or defend your choices. They were waiting for a crack they could exploit, a slip they could exaggerate, a flaw they could weaponize. But none of that happened. You didn't react the way they hoped. You didn't validate their fears with overreactions or unnecessary explanations. You didn't seek approval, play games, or bend to their expectations, and that more than anything unnerved them. The silence, restraint, and composure you maintained wasn't absence. It was presence in its purest form. It left them without leverage, without satisfaction, and without control. What made them uncomfortable wasn't that you were bold or assertive. It was that you refused to participate in their attempts to manipulate the narrative. They wanted conflict to feel justified, gossip to feel meaningful, and investigation to feel productive. You gave them nothing. Your calm, your clarity, and your consistency acted like a mirror they weren't prepared to face. The lack of reaction forced them to confront the reality that their assumptions, fears, and strategies were meaningless against someone who doesn't respond to pressure the way they expect. Every effort they made to provoke a reaction only highlighted the gap between their methods and your reality. The more they tried to engage you indirectly, to unsettle you or to expose you, the clearer it became that you weren't operating on their rules or within their expectations. The truth was terrifying to them. You don't need to prove yourself, justify your actions, or participate in their drama to maintain your presence and power. In the end, what scared them most wasn't your actions, because actions can be judged and analyzed. What scared them was your restraint. Your refusal to react revealed a strength they couldn't dismantle, a confidence they couldn't manipulate, and a clarity they couldn't distort. You didn't give them the satisfaction of chaos, and that made you untouchable, inscrutable, and profoundly unsettling in ways that no investigation could ever fix. Number 12. They realized the reason everyone said the same thing about you is because you don't fragment yourself to fit environments. Most people wear different masks depending on where they are and who they're with. They adjust their personality to fit expectations, manipulate impressions to control outcomes, or hide pieces of themselves to avoid conflict. You don't. You show up the same way everywhere, for everyone. Your behavior, energy, and choices don't shift, depending on audience or circumstance. That's why every witness reported the same observations. They weren't seeing fragments or contradictions. They were seeing the whole picture. You are consistent, coherent, and aligned, and that kind of authenticity is rare enough to feel almost unnatural to people who rely on adaptation as survival. Your refusal to fragment yourself makes you easy to understand, but hard to manipulate. People around you don't need to decipher motives, guess intentions, or second-guess your behavior, because what they see is exactly what you are. That clarity is both magnetic and threatening. For those who investigated you, it was a shock. They were used to reading people like shifting puzzles, where context changes everything and nothing is ever reliable. Your stability made them uncomfortable because it didn't require interpretation or justification. They couldn't create drama where none existed, and they couldn't exaggerate flaws because you didn't give them angles to twist. This kind of presence is rare because it requires self-knowledge, discipline, and courage. It's not a performance or a strategy. It's a way of living that refuses compromise with inconsistency or deceit. And because of that, their investigation couldn't produce conflicting accounts. Every witness described the same energy, the same behavior, the same reality. You don't need to pretend, and that's exactly what left them scrambling for answers. Ultimately, the consistency they reported wasn't a result of control. It was a reflection of integrity. You don't fragment yourself to fit environments because you operate on your own internal alignment. And when people can't bend you to their expectations, their perception of you converges into one unavoidable truth. What they see is all there is, and it's undeniable. Number 13. The investigation made them confront a painful reality. Your character is more consistent than their intentions. When people try to investigate someone, they usually assume they have an upper hand. They expect that probing, questioning, or analyzing will uncover contradictions or weaknesses. But when they turned their focus on you, the reality was impossible to ignore. Your character is steady, disciplined, and aligned, while their own intentions were messy, inconsistent, and often self-serving. Every effort they made to find flaws revealed more about their inability to maintain integrity than it did about any fault in you. Your life, your choices, and your behavior acted like a mirror, reflecting not just what you are, but what they aren't. They couldn't manufacture lies or exaggerate inconsistencies because you didn't provide any. They couldn't manipulate narratives because your story doesn't bend. Every attempt to dissect you ended with the same truth. You operate on principles, not convenience. Your consistency forced them to face an uncomfortable comparison. They were not the people they claimed to be, and here you were, living the reality they couldn't match. That's what made their investigation futile and frustrating. They were hunting shadows while the substance stood in front of them, undeniable and unshakable. The more they tried to scrutinize you, the more their own contradictions became obvious. Their questions, insinuations, and assumptions weren't exposing you. They were highlighting their own inconsistencies. Your life doesn't need justification, manipulation, or validation, and that stark contrast against their shifting intentions was unbearable for them to reconcile. The investigation revealed that while you move with purpose and clarity, they often move with hesitation, fear, or self-interest. In the end, the painful reality they faced wasn't about what you had done. It was about who you are. Their obsession with uncovering flaws ended up shining a light on the instability of their own intentions. Your character didn't just withstand scrutiny, it illuminated the gaps in theirs. And that is why every witness, every account, and every observation pointed to the same undeniable fact. Your integrity, consistency, and alignment stand unchallenged, while theirs crumble under reflection. Number 14. In the end, the investigation wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. They believed that by examining you, questioning witnesses, and piecing together stories, they would uncover secrets, inconsistencies, or weaknesses that could be exploited. They thought the investigation gave them power, control, and insight. What they didn't realize was that it wasn't about you at all. Every question they asked, every rumor they chased, every assumption they tried to prove only reflected back their own insecurities, fears, and limitations. You became a mirror, showing them parts of themselves they weren't ready to face. The closer they looked at you, the clearer it became that their discomfort had little to do with your life and everything to do with their inability to match your clarity, integrity, and consistency. Every witness telling the same story wasn't just a testament to your life, it was a reflection of the impact you have on the people around you. They saw your steadiness, honesty, and alignment and felt it against their own chaos and indecision. They saw your calm confidence and were reminded of their own need for validation. They saw your discipline and realized how often they compromised theirs. Your life forced them to confront truths about themselves, and that confrontation is uncomfortable. That's why the investigation felt urgent, obsessive, and invasive. They weren't studying you. They were studying their own inability to exist with the same consistency and authenticity. By the end, the investigation revealed nothing about you that wasn't already visible. You didn't need to hide, justify, or perform. What it revealed was that people fear what they cannot replicate, and they obsess over what they cannot control. Their reports, testimonies, and assumptions weren't evidence of your flaws. They were evidence of the way your presence exposes the fragility of their own choices. The mirror they held up to themselves was relentless. You didn't break under scrutiny, you simply existed. And in existing so fully, you reflected back their truths in ways they couldn't escape. The investigation wasn't a weapon, it was a revelation. It showed that the world can be observed, analyzed, and questioned. But some people like you exist beyond interpretation. Their obsession only confirmed your reality, untouchable, aligned, and undeniable. Conclusion. In the end, the investigation wasn't about uncovering secrets, finding faults, or controlling your life. It was about fear, projection, and the uncomfortable truth that someone like you, consistent, aligned, and unshakably real, cannot be understood through gossip, assumptions, or scrutiny. Every witness, every report, every question only confirmed what has always been true. Your life operates on principles. Your presence leaves a mark, and your character cannot be fractured by the opinions or insecurities of others. They searched for flaws, but they only found mirrors. They hunted for contradictions, but all they encountered was coherence. They wanted chaos, but your calm remained untouchable. Every attempt to manipulate, explain, or expose you only highlighted the depth of your authenticity. You don't bend, you don't perform, and you don't need validation. And that is the reality that unsettled them more than anything else. This isn't just a story about being observed. It's a lesson in power, alignment, and presence. When you live with clarity and integrity, the world reacts, not always with admiration, but with recognition. They investigated you not to understand, but because you exist in a way that forces reflection, accountability, and honesty. Your life became a mirror, showing them truths they couldn't escape and a consistency they couldn't replicate. That is your power. That is your truth. If this resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel to catch more deep, eye-opening content. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and share this with someone who needs to see it. The world notices those who live aligned and unshakable, and it's time more people understood why. Stay blessed always.